corruption and fraud have completely overtaken the economic and political systems, and we look into today, the Fed is actually caught reading a speech written by Goldman Sachs. This is intentional propaganda, and we'll get into that today. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's get into some of this right here. This is out of Barron's talking about the tech stocks sizzling up the new bubble. But they actually say this right here, that the situation today is fundamentally different. Now, how many times have we heard that before? Let's just read a final line where they said, "We say this knowing that the most dangerous words on Wall Street are, this time it's different." And if you read the article further, it basically says that the NASDAQ is headed towards its previous record. So right there, it would mark something very important for the NASDAQ and for tech stocks in general. And at that point, they're going to celebrate. They're going to bring out the champagne just as always. And what does this mean for the future of tech stocks? Is now the new boom, the new bubble? Is this forming right here? But it's just no different than other stocks that have been doing well. The central banks around the world are printing out money, and that's going to send the prices higher. But of course, they're devaluing the currency at the same time. They are saying that this time is different. Well, here at the Money GPS, we need to look into the reality of the situation. We're going to get into that right away. First, I want to talk about in my book how I talked about this so-called new normal and how they said that they had an actual perpetual rise in the stock market. These are literal quotes here. And in my book, just quoting, it said that they believed that the boom of the 1920s was natural and perpetual, even though they had expanded every form of government program that there could be. They were pumping out money from the central bank, and here they were acting upon the way that they said they were not, and they said it was natural, but it was far from the truth. And it said here, American prosperity was caused by a payment of high wages instead of the other way around. They're doing this right now, where they're allowing these systems to be pushed up when really everything needs to come down, fall down to its natural level, and then real investment will come up and pick up the pieces. But of course, we have zombie banks all around the world. We have all kinds of companies that should have gone bankrupt, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but of course, the taxpayer is ready to foot the bill. Let's get into the big news of the day. Goldman letter. Banks and watchdog move closer in a crisis. Many good things actually in this article out of the Financial Times. A lot of good stuff to read. I definitely recommend it. But it said this. Goldman drafting its own statement, which I'll just forward ahead and just show you that statement right here. It is out of the Goldman Sachs website. Goldman Sachs to become the fourth largest bank holding company. And this was back in 2008. And, not really worth looking into the article itself. Just look at this here out of the Financial Times. Goldman drafted its own statement, quoting Lloyd Blankfein, chief executive, as saying, "We believe that Goldman Sachs under Federal Reserve supervision will be regarded as an even more secure institution." That's a pretty bold statement right there. And then we go on further. It said that Goldman then drafted another release and sent it to the New York Fed. This one was to be used as the central bank's own statement. They actually spoke the words as propaganda. They are not even writing their own speeches. They're getting this from the very banks that they're supposed to be basically in some ways supervising when you think about it, but essentially they are working as one in the same unit. The banks and the central banks and the politicians are all in collusion with each other. There is this complicity that is happening, and we're watching this happen right before our very eyes. How can this possibly be allowed that Goldman Sachs, who's of course in control of so much of the government, their alumni practically runs the US government, and this also extends out into Europe and other places I've gotten into here on the channel before, but essentially they're allowed to even give out the speeches, the propaganda itself, the marketing itself is being allowed to be, actually used by these corporations like the New York Fed and the Federal Reserve itself. This is unbelievable. So let's dig deeper into this. Just once again to note, this is right from the Goldman Sachs website, the actual statement itself. If you feel like reading it, it'll always, as always, be in the description below. Let's look at this. Let's look at more fraud. Citigroup panicked over fraud at Chinese ports. And this, you can read the article for yourself, but essentially there was some metals, I believe it was copper and another metal, that essentially was loaned out to more than one person. They had some problems there. They need to figure out the fraud. And this is what I want to tell you, is that there is so much fraud. It's not just these isolated incidents that are occurring. We see a lot of the fraud with the tungsten gold bars. We are seeing a lot of this leasing of the gold, the rehypothecation of the gold. We're looking at other commodities that they are essentially having a lot of problems with. We saw even fraud really opened up really with the book that written by Frank Partnoy. If you haven't read it, it is absolutely incredible. It's called Infectious Greed. Talks about, leading in from the 80s, 90s and on, essentially how bad the financial system is, the deep insider information. This gets into the stuff a lot before Michael Lewis's work, previous to that, and essentially describes how companies are able to put any information they want in their annual reports and their quarterly reports. They can literally create any numbers that they want to simply by fudging the numbers. This is fraud. It is illegal. They don't have to use the generally accepted accounting principles because they can just move the numbers around, and they're doing it all the time. It is impossible to have any sense of reality in this market anymore. And let's just go into this. I never get tired of looking at these type of charts right here. Labor force participation, white men over 20, and the beginning of the chart starts off at 1955, and it is to present day, and it has declined significantly, a straight line downward, as we see not just for white men over 20, but we're seeing the labor force participation rates declining significantly over the past decades. This is something that doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon. In fact, in the last few years since the financial crisis, the decline has actually increased dramatically. So this is something to look into. When we see the stock market pushing higher and higher, it actually scares me more and more, because as I've researched all of the previous rises, all of the hot money that flew into Asia, all of the different crises that have happened over the recent times, and of course the historic times, we saw that the faster a rise occurred, the harder the crash occurred afterwards. This is pretty much every single time. The only times we don't see this is when we have an intervention in the market that distorts that economy and it destroys it. And we've seen this in one particular example with Japan. They thought they can get away with propping up their banking system, and it has not worked out for them. They are really suffering at this point in many ways, and they just cannot keep up with this. This is exactly what all of the central banks around the world are doing, making the same mistakes, not learning from the past, not allowing things to crash downward. And it is you, the individual citizen, who are getting hurt most by this. And what I would say to those who are looking for solutions, your best and first most important thing that you can do is take your money out of the financial system. It is too risky, there's too much fragility, and you will be punished for investing in the system. So when you pull out your money, not only are you adding safety to your wealth, you're also able to basically diminish their fractional reserve banking scheme. So it is a win in two different ways. This is what I recommend for those who are looking for increased safety, who also want to fight back against the system and do so in a way that is completely legal and completely straightforward. If you found this informative, please give me a thumbs up, and of course subscribe to the videos. There are now over 10,000 subscribers to the Money GPS. Thank you all, each and every single one of you. I really appreciate all the comments, all the emails, constantly getting swarmed with emails. I do email back. Please, if you have a question, if you just want to comment to me, anything, I'm always looking forward to the emails. The best place to get me definitely is on the insiders, and of course if you're not on there, you need to be on there. It's totally free. It's available at themoneygps.com. Just scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.